An iron cage clamps over a woman's head. A metal bit locks between her teeth. She can't speak. She can't swallow right. Every step she takes is a warning to every other woman watching. And this is only the first device. Because the next one doesn't silence her. It rewrites her reality. This is the hidden machinery of punishment built for women. Devices designed not just to hurt, but to humiliate, control, and erase. And to understand how they worked, you have to follow one real woman into a room where truth didn't matter. Only confession did. Her name was Agnes Sampson. Not a queen. Not a general. A healer. In late 1500 Scotland, that was power. Quiet power. The kind you can't tax or command with a sword. Agnes knew herbs. Fever remedies. Childbirth. The private truths of women's bodies. Miscarriages. Blood. Pain. Shame. She was the person you begged for when your baby wouldn't breathe. The person you whispered to when your husband's hands left bruises. And that made her dangerous. Because in a world ruled by ministers and kings, a woman with knowledge was a problem. Especially when that knowledge moved from kitchen to cradle to sickbed. Places men didn't fully control. Agnes wasn't famous for wealth. She was remembered because she stood at the exact intersection of two unstoppable forces. Female independence and state terror. Scotland was anxious. Harvests failed. Disease moved faster than prayers. Storms ripped ships apart. And when people are afraid, they don't hunt answers. They hunt targets. Then came the spark that lit the country. King James VI, young, brilliant, paranoid, became obsessed with witchcraft. He didn't just believe in it. He studied it. He feared it. And when a violent storm threatened his sea voyage home from Denmark, rumors spread like wildfire. Someone had called the weather itself to kill him. The hunt began. Not for criminals. For confessions. Agnes lived near North Berwick, where whispers turned into accusations, and accusations turned into arrests. She had treated people. Helped them. Been paid with bread and thanks. But gratitude is fragile. Fear is stronger. History remembers Agnes Sampson because she became a template. A woman accused. A woman broken. And a woman used to justify the next arrest. And the next. And the next. Her story isn't just about one execution. It's about the devices they built to make women compliant. Physically, socially, spiritually. And once you see how those devices worked, you start seeing their shadows everywhere. Agnes doesn't rise the way kings rise. She rises the way rumors rise. The way reputation rises. The way a name becomes necessary. In her community, childbirth is a battlefield. Infection. Bleeding. Babies born too early. Mothers who don't come back from the scream and the struggle. And when the men stand outside the door, helpless and furious, it's women like Agnes who decide what happens next. She becomes known as steady hands. Calm voice. A mind that remembers what worked last winter, and the winter before that. People come to her not because they trust medicine, there isn't much of it, but because they trust her. And that trust is its own kind of authority. But power like that creates enemies. Not the kind who challenge you openly. The kind who watch. The kind who wait. The kind who collect grievances like knives. If a child dies after Agnes visits, grief looks for someone to blame. If a husband's illness worsens, desperation turns into suspicion. If a woman survives childbirth when the minister says it was God's will she wouldn't, then someone starts asking the wrong question. How did she do that? Across Scotland, the atmosphere changes. Sermons become threats. Prayer becomes surveillance. The state starts to treat gossip like evidence. And King James, convinced that invisible enemies are circling his throne, gives the witch hunters what they crave most: permission. This is how the system gains momentum. Not with one arrest. With an idea that women like Agnes aren't helpers. They're hidden operators. Secret hands on the steering wheel of fate. Then the investigators arrive. Men armed with scripture, authority, and a new kind of tool. Not a sword. A procedure. They listen to villagers who want revenge dressed up as righteousness. They record rumors like facts. They collect names. They don't ask, "Did she do it?" They ask, "How soon can she confess?" Because once a woman confesses, the hunt becomes self-feeding. Every confession produces more names. Every name produces another cell, another body, another example. Agnes feels the temperature of the town drop around her. Conversations stop when she enters. Doors close. Eyes follow. The same people she once helped now look at her like she's something that crawled out of the earth. And somewhere above it all, in a palace far away, a king convinces himself that his life depends on breaking women like her. Agnes doesn't know it yet, but she has already been selected. Not for what she did, for what she represents. The conflict doesn't start with proof. It starts with pressure. A storm. A rumor. A political need. A personal grudge. In Witch Hunt Scotland, any spark can become a wildfire, because the authorities aren't trying to put it out. They're trying to aim it. Agnes is questioned. At first, it's almost civilized. A minister's cold stare. A magistrate's careful tone. The kind of questioning that pretends there's an escape if you just tell the truth. But the truth isn't the point. They want a story that fits their fear. A meeting at night, whispered vows, invisible marks on the skin, a conspiracy against the king. They ask about other women, other healers, other midwives. They ask about the kinds of gatherings men were never invited to, the private circles where women exchanged knowledge. Agnes denies it. Again, again, again. And denial is treated as defiance. This is where betrayal enters, not as a dramatic backstab, but as something smaller and more common. A neighbor remembers something strange. A woman who once sought Agnes's help now repeats a rumor to save herself. Someone says Agnes muttered words they didn't like. Someone else claims she looked at them wrong at the market. The investigators nod. They write it down. Now it's evidence. Then the professional cruelty arrives. Not rage. Not chaos. Organization. A method designed to create the same outcome every time. They bring in men skilled at finding witch marks. They speak of hidden signs on the body. Proof that can't be argued with because they can always find it. Agnes is searched, inspected, exposed. Her privacy becomes public property. Her body becomes a document the state believes it has the right to read. And then comes the turning point. The moment the story stops being about accusation and becomes about extraction. Agnes is told there are only two paths: confess and live a little longer, or refuse and suffer until you confess anyway. This is the genius of the system. It doesn't need to be correct. It only needs to be consistent. And it's built so that resistance is punished, while compliance is rewarded with the illusion of mercy. Somewhere in this machinery, Agnes realizes something horrifying. She isn't being tried. She's being processed. And once that process begins, the ending is already written. All that remains is deciding which device will write it into her body first. They take Agnes in custody, and the town watches like it's theater. Because public humiliation is not a side effect. It's part of the device. They strip away dignity first, before they ever touch bone or blood. Hair is cut. Clothing is handled like contaminated fabric. She is treated as if shame itself is proof. Then the tools appear. One of the most notorious is built for a specific crime: having a voice. The scold's bridle, an iron framework that cages the head. Inside it, a metal piece presses into the mouth so speech becomes pain. Not just silence. Punishment for the attempt to speak. The message is clear. A woman's words are a problem, so they build iron to solve it. Agnes is moved, questioned, moved again. She's denied rest, denied comfort, denied even the basic rhythm of time. In some cases, women are watched, kept awake for days, until the mind begins to fracture on its own. No wound to point to, no bruise to display. Just exhaustion so deep it becomes hallucination. And then, when the body is weak enough, they introduce compression. Devices like thumbscrews, known in Scotland as pilliwinks, that turn refusal into a mechanical choice. Yield, or feel the pressure tighten one cruel increment at a time. The interrogators don't need to shout. The metal does the persuading. Agnes is offered relief in exchange for a story. They feed her details. They correct her when she remembers wrong. They reward the right answers with pauses, water, breath. This is how the confession is manufactured. And when she finally breaks, when she gives them what they want, they don't celebrate her humanity. They treat her collapse as confirmation that the system works. Worse, now that she has confessed, they make her useful. Who else was there? Who taught you? Who met with you? Names are demanded. Names spill out. Sometimes real. Sometimes random. Sometimes selected because the interrogators suggest them first. A confession becomes a map for the next raid. Agnes's humiliation isn't only physical. It's social, spiritual, total. She is turned into a warning sign with a heartbeat. And in the background, officials prepare the final stage, where the state doesn't just punish the body. It punishes the idea of women like her ever existing again. The final event is not quick, not in meaning, not in effect. Agnes is brought to formal judgment in a world where her confession has already poisoned the room. The authorities speak in the language of certainty. Ministers frame it as holy duty. Officials frame it as national security. The crowd frames it as entertainment disguised as justice. And somewhere in this storm of righteousness, the king's obsession looms like a shadow. Accounts from the North Berwick Trials describe King James himself taking interest, personally questioning accused women, hungry for details that would validate his fear. When a ruler listens for monsters, the kingdom learns to produce them. Agnes stands inside a story she didn't write, and the state calls it truth. Execution in these cases is designed to do more than end a life. It's engineered to teach, to carve a lesson into the memory of everyone watching. She is condemned. The rituals are cold. The language is clean. The outcome is not. In Scotland, the standard method in which executions often involved strangling first, then burning the body, an official attempt to control suffering while still delivering the spectacle. Even without graphic detail, the horror is unavoidable. A human being turned into a symbol, extinguished in public so fear can spread faster than mercy ever could. Smoke rises. Faces stare. Some people pray. Some people don't look away. Some feel relief, because if Agnes is the witch, then their world makes sense again. But the true brutality isn't only in the ending. It's in what happens next. Because Agnes's death doesn't close the case. It expands it. Her confession becomes justification to arrest more women. Her coerced words become the blueprint for further interrogations. And the devices, bridles, screws, sleep deprivation, public shaming, remain polished and ready. That's the real historical impact. The execution isn't the conclusion. It's the advertisement. A kingdom learns that it can control women with iron, paperwork, and crowds. That it can turn private knowledge into public crime. That it can weaponize rumor into law. Agnes disappears into smoke, but the machinery that consumed her becomes part of the system, waiting for the next woman with a voice too sharp, a mind too useful, or a life too independent. Here's the part most people miss about torture devices used on women. Many of them weren't designed to kill. They were designed to correct speech, to correct behavior, to correct independence, to correct the audacity of being noticed. The scold's bridle doesn't exist because a society feared violence. It exists because a society feared women speaking publicly, speaking angrily, speaking persistently, speaking at all. It turns the mouth into a crime scene. The thumbscrews and waking and body searches weren't only about pain. They were about ownership. They told every woman, your body is not fully yours. Your privacy is not real. Your no is temporary. And the most effective part was never the device itself. It was the crowd. Because humiliation scales. Pain is personal, but shame is contagious. When one woman is paraded, caged, searched, silenced, everyone else learns the lesson without ever being touched. That's why these stories matter now. Not because we're still surrounded by iron cages and screws in town squares, but because the logic behind them, the urge to control, to publicly break, to turn a woman's reputation into evidence, doesn't need medieval tools to survive. The tools evolve. Sometimes the device is law. Sometimes it's a headline. Sometimes it's a comment section. Sometimes it's the quiet agreement that a woman who knows too much, says too much, or refuses to shrink must be punished back into place. Agnes Sampson's last days weren't just a tragedy. They were a demonstration, a state-sponsored message delivered through metal, sleep, and forced confession. Your truth doesn't matter if we can manufacture a better one. And that leaves one question, sharp enough to cut through centuries of smoke. If a society can build machines to silence women, what is it afraid women will say when they're finally allowed to speak?